Team, welcome back to another podcast. I am here with Mr. Erwin Regador, who is sat in his cozy little office in Shanghai. Erwin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so a little introduction from my end. How I know Erwin. 2014. I'm honestly going to say this is one of the greatest ever competitions to be run in Asia, the Downtown Throwdown. The one that we both competed in was probably not at its finest at the point. It was developmental years, but myself and Erwin competed against one another in a CrossFit competition. I certainly was fairly new to the sport. I think Erwin was kind of dabbling in it in his early years as well. And after that kind of competing experience, I didn't really hear too much from Erwin. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't on social media space all that much. Don't think Erwin was all that much. And then kind of as I guess CrossFit in Asia, specifically in China, started to blow up, Erwin became the man with a plan in China, doing some really, really good stuff. And, you know, Erwin, I followed your journey ever since 2014 as a coach, and I kind of love where you're going. I think we're very like-minded in many of our principles in terms of how we work with people and our mission. And you know, have an amazing business, Alfa Coaching, but essentially you're a kind of a lone wolf over there, you know, slowly making moves. So that's my story about the Ed and Erwin relationship. Erwin, tell us about yourself. What are you doing with yourself? Where are you based in the world? Over to you.
Yeah, so again, Erwin, thanks for having me, Ed. Originally from Los Angeles. I've been living in Shanghai now for 7.5 years. It's going to be 8 years in next February, actually. And it's actually pretty cool. I had no intentions of ever coming out to China. I didn't even know that you could coach out here, or, you know, people were looking for CrossFit coaches out here. And just one summer, I just ended up getting asked to come out here, and it pretty much unfolded from there. So for the most part, in Shanghai, I've helped a couple of gyms build out, a couple of CrossFit gyms build out. And at the moment right now, I'm just kind of a lone wolf. Like you said, I started my own online coaching and personal training business in 2017, but I still do dabble in kind of coaching at a couple gyms, just more of a floater coach per se. Other than that, man, just really living the life. And I mean, my wife and I are out here, and we're stuck here for now. We can't get out of the country. So I think for us, we're pretty much going to be here for a longer time, just in terms of, you know, future work and family planning. But to be honest, you know, I don't see us really wanting to go anywhere else. We love it out here in China, and, you know, there's a lot of good opportunities for us here in Shanghai.
Nice. All right. And I know we touched on this really quickly before the episode, but like, what's the COVID situation in China right now? You know, remembering that this was like the China disease. This is where it all started. Yet, from what I see, like, life looks great right now and you're thriving. So what is it like over there right now?
You know, to be honest, you know, as quote unquote normal as it can be, it does feel that it's very similar to how it was before the whole initial lockdown in China. So for us in Shanghai, there's still, you know, people are still wearing masks. There's still that courtesy aspect of it, that when you're in a taxi or if you're going into a public place, that you should wear it. But I mean, like you said, businesses, to me, they seem like they're thriving. You know, there are some businesses that did close down, but, you know, smaller ones that you don't really know about. But for the most part, I'm out here, you know, day to day, heading off on the scooter to the gym. You know, when I need to go places, it's just as normal. So we're lucky. Again, I'm from the States, so like kind of seeing my family back there, kind of what they have to deal with, and other businesses and friends back there, what they're doing. We're just hoping that they kind of get back to that space. But for the most part, at least in China here in mainland, it does feel like quote unquote normal. But I guess we've just adapted to what the new normal is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. And, you know, I know you're sitting currently in your office, which is also your kind of home gym as well. Is that something you created during the first COVID closure, or is that something you've always had?
You know, it's funny. I have always been kind of a gym rat. So I kind of accumulated a lot of shit over the years, just because like I always wanted to have stuff. So my first apartment, I decided, hey, I want just a spin bike. So I got this janky old, you know, Airdyne wannabe bike that I had at my old place. And then from there, I just kind of started accumulating a lot of stuff. Now, it's actually funny because the goal to getting a lot of the equipment wasn't because of COVID. you know, I already had some of the stuff at the house. It was actually just thinking like, you know, in terms of family planning, the goal would be, okay, I can just work out at home. So this is what I wanted at home. So at home, I actually have rower, air bike, and just kettlebells, just a lot of stuff here. So it actually became a dual office and gym setup once we were kind of locked down for a while.
And I feel like for listeners hearing that, they're probably envisioning like this massive garage basement gym with a huge like rogue rig setup, but it's not. This is like, it looks on social media like you have a skinny like 2 by 2 meter office, but in there you've somehow got a rower, a salt bike, some heavy ass kettlebells, and you're just getting your sessions done daily. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, it fits perfectly. Just one little yoga mat and it's good to go.
You just mentioned the word gym junkie there, and like tell us about your story. Like what got you into the fitness game?
Oh man, so that's a pretty good one. So what got me into the fitness game is playing freshman football in high school, American football. So started off playing American football, and that summer prior to freshman season, we actually had a strength and conditioning or kind of a gym thing that we had to go to. So I was like, okay, this is, you know, a weight room. I actually started going there, and when we started playing football, I was like, I don't think this is for me, but I like the gym. So freshman year of high school, I ended up getting a bench press and weight set to have in the garage at our house in LA. And pretty much that's all I was doing. Bench pressing, had a 15-pound dumbbells. So bench pressing, curling every day, pretty much, right? That led me kind of into high school, going to the gym at school for a bit, kind of mess around with the stuff there. And it wasn't until college, actually, that all that really, really came about. So in 8th grade, in my senior year of high school, I ended up working at a GNC. So I was super into supplements. Like anything that I could get my hands on, I just like would go down my mouth, right? Powders, all that kind of stuff. And that really got me into bodybuilding. So basically every magazine I had at the time was all the Flex magazines, a bunch of muscular development magazines. So my introduction to fitness was actually the bodybuilding world. I was super into bodybuilding. I had family that lived in Vegas. So I went to a bunch of Olympias back in the day. And for me, going to those expos were just, you know, kid in the candy store. We'd go there, collect all the free junk that you would get in like a gigantic bag. It was like Halloween, right? And from there, I went to college. I actually worked at the school gym in college. And then I found this another nutrition supplement store there that I started working at as well. Now, you know, I had always been this kid, you know, through high school and through college, like was into bodybuilding, but never ever thought of myself as like, I'm never going to get on stage and do that kind of shit. You know, like I can't put on a little Speedo and, you know, be half naked up there. But I went to school in Santa Cruz, and there was a show, like a local show there. And my boss at the time was like, hey, you know, why don't you just try the show? We sponsor it and everything. It took me a while. I was like, okay, you know, I'll do it. So I ended up doing it. I did well and did a second show after that. And pretty much bodybuilding, you know, through college, after college, I moved back to Los Angeles, like 2008. And from there, I actually transitioned into CrossFit somehow. So that's another story in itself. But how I found CrossFit was back in Santa Cruz, 2005, 2006. There was a guy that came into that supplement store. This was like the OG CrossFit, you know, scene at that time. He said like, oh,
2005, 2006. That's like early days.
Yeah, 2005, 2006. I remember he would come in, like this CrossFit guy, his name is Jason Highbarger. He would come in, it's like, you know, bodybuilding in Santa Cruz at the time was the big thing. You had Gold's Gym. You had a World Gym where Dave Draper was at. So it was his gym. I got to meet him a couple times. Awesome. And he said, you know, why don't you try this thing called CrossFit? And I was like, you know, like, I don't know. Like, I'm just into my own thing right now. So anyway, I ended up doing a workout with him one day. I think it was like sit-ups. It was GHD sit-ups, some like banded pull-ups, and some running type stuff. It was funny though, because I came into that gym, and I don't remember if you remember those high top shoes that bodybuilders would wear, like the Atomic shoes.
Yeah.
So I had a pair of those on. And I was doing this work. I was like, this is not for me. I was like, this is like, I was dying. And at the time, this was at the old Research Park Drive locations, the OG CrossFit Santa
Yeah,
Cruz.
yeah.
And I never got back into CrossFit after that. But 2008, moved back home. And then I was in a job that I hated. And then I was transitioning into applying for the United States Marine Corps Officer Candidate School. So once I did that, I was like, okay, I need to train differently. So I remember CrossFit was there. I found a CrossFit gym that was like near my area. And then from there, the rest is kind of history. Started doing that, and CrossFit itself, landed me here in China somehow.
Well, so yeah, you don't just end up, training in a CrossFit gym and suddenly end up in China. So what was that story? What happened from did you start you were coaching in this place, I assume?
Yeah. So I was when I was applying for the officer candidate school for the Marine Corps, I was just a regular patron of the gym. What ended up happening is my application actually fell through. So the owner at the time, he said, hey, why don't you be a coach? So I started coaching there, and that was for about 2 years I was coaching. And for whatever reason, I got a Facebook message from an old kindergarten to 8th grade friend of mine. And she messaged saying like, hey, do you want to have, coffee and lunch? And then I want to just talk about if you've heard about this thing called CrossFit. So at the time, her and her partner, they were looking to open a personal training boutique studio. And she actually didn't know I was coaching CrossFit, but she knew I was like into the fitness thing through bodybuilding, etc. And we met up. I told her about, hey, I've been coaching CrossFit for this many years, yada, yada. At the end of our conversation, she was literally like, hey, so, you want to come out to Shanghai and be our head coach and director of programming of this CrossFit gym that we want to open? And I was like, what? I didn't even, super naive. I didn't even know what China was like. And, I had a stereotypical in my head. It was going to just be countryside and, whatnot. So when they brought me out October 2012. And the first time I got out here, I was like, oh crap, this is a legit big city. And, I was 28, single at the time, no kids. So I was like, why not? And I landed February 2013, and, just been here ever since, coaching CrossFit and coaching people now online and personal training.
So talk us through that, like landing in China, you're setting up this gym. What's the journey of CrossFit been like in China?
It's been pretty cool. I think, for me, what's cool, at least within China, the gym that I helped set up was Reebok CrossFit Me Wellness. They were actually the second affiliate in mainland China and the second in Shanghai. But for me, I felt that was the gym that really kind of put CrossFit on the map in China. From what I saw, at least from that gym, within like a few years, I think within a year or two, the level 1 started coming out to China. So the seminar staff was out there. And right as soon as that happened, literally, I felt like it was like the boom, right? So the boom in terms of CrossFit growth in China felt like how it was in the US around, let's say, 09, 10, 11, 12, kind of that golden era, right? It's been great, actually. I mean, I don't know how big the growth is at right now in terms of like how much it's still growing, but CrossFit, in terms of its popularity in Shanghai, I think there's like 10 plus, 13 plus gyms, and it's still growing a lot. I mean, I don't even know like how it was in Hong Kong at the time, but the growth itself, it's been cool to see. And then a lot of, like China, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of branching out of the CrossFit gyms. So similar type studios that are like CrossFit, without the name itself, but for the most part, people love it. And to me, it still has that old school CrossFit feel to me, like where people, they like the intensity of the CrossFit gyms out here. But there's folks here that just love that group atmosphere. They love lifting barbells, and they love the competing aspect here. I feel that's what they really love.
It's funny you saying that. When I think back, so for us, Coastal Fitness, we opened our doors in 2013, and at the time we were the second affiliate in Hong Kong. So Asphodel had been probably doing their thing for a couple of years. They were very early entrants to the market, I'd say, in the grand scheme of Asia and CrossFit. So it really kind of wasn't a thing. We opened up, and I think after us opening up in 2013, I think 2014, 15, 16, we pretty much had like 1 to 3 gyms open up every year.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like our booming phase. And I think when I think back to CrossFit then, and perhaps we're guilty because as a coaches, we 100% felt this way as well. We were excited about a new sport. There's opportunities to travel with things like regionals and competitions around the area. Like we didn't really know about training methodology, to be honest, other than go as hard as you possibly can, as often as you possibly can. And that there was just never going to be a time where we were going to stop until, of course, eventually we all got broken and burnt out and injured and, realized that we had to change something. But you know what? It's funny because when I I've been lucky enough to spend some time in China at CrossFit gyms, running athlete camps and coaching development stuff. And you're right, there still very much is that that raw feel of CrossFit, which is like the camaraderie, the stepping into gym and like all your friends are there. Everyone decked out head to toe in road gear.
Yeah.
Like every American brand you can think of that's big is like everyone in China is wearing it. And I actually love that. The coaching still very much is like get in your face, work hard, go harder. And when you don't have any more, give a little bit more. And it really does kind of bring me back to like the old days of CrossFit in Hong Kong when we first started, which was like a really, really exciting time. And I have nothing but, amazing memories of those times.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, every now and then I'm like, all the gyms that I've gone to, like in Shanghai, it is that same feeling, that same, like how you said, like every American brand decked out. It's nostalgic for me, just like, oh man, I was there. Like I'm 36 now, so I definitely can't go balls to the wall like that anymore, just because like I'm broken right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hilarious. But the interesting thing, the thing that popped into my head as soon as you started talking about that, still having that very like raw feel to CrossFit over there, that's definitely, and you kind of just alluded to it just then, that's not really where your head is at these days as a coach. I definitely, from looking on the outside in, you're very much more about the longevity piece, training a little bit smarter rather than harder. Like kind of what are some of your coaching principles, and how does that differ to the rest of most of folks in China who are in the CrossFit space, who I guess are technically, your target market?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's interesting because in terms of how my training philosophy has changed, I feel like it's kind of come full circle back into the bodybuilding days, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, that's how I found fitness. And then here was this other form of training, let's say CrossFit, that kind of came in. And for me, that provided me a space to, as a quote unquote athlete that I thought of myself back in the day, it was an outlet for me to kind of express myself in, just as this competitive way, right? As I, kind of got older, I just knew that there was just no way that I could kind of keep up the way I was training, because it's funny that you said, like when we first met each other back, 2014 at the, the downtown throwdown, at the time when I first came to China, my mindset was like, oh, I'm this kid from the US. Like there's no one doing CrossFit out in Asia yet. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to do this regionals thing. And, I'm just going to obliterate everybody. And it's funny because 2014, I remember in the open, I was like, oh, I came in the top 100. It's like, I just need a couple more years to train. I have my own personal coach. I'm just going to keep getting better and better. The problem was for me, and this is kind of what I see in most of the clients that I work with now, it's training with this type of intensity, but the lifestyle piece is just complete, needs a whole makeover. And what I mean by that is, coming into Shanghai, I like to party and have a social life myself. So that was kind of the balance that I had. It was thinking that I wanted to be this competitive athlete, but at the same time, like, I wasn't doing any of the things that I needed to do to be an athlete. But at the time, I didn't even know what that was, right? So in terms of my own training philosophy now, it's the people that I work with, I've been lucky enough to kind of come from that CrossFit space. And for me, the biggest thing that I've kind of, taught them along the way is that, okay, this is how I used to think about training for CrossFit, if they wanted to be competitive, etc. But then really just, okay, giving them the truth. So for me, it's always been like, okay, what was the goal in the grand scheme of things, right? The goal was, for them, let's say it's always like the improvement in the open. They want to be competitive. They want to learn new skills. So it was, okay, let's see where we're at. So it was a matter of like, okay, we assess that. And then in my head, it was like, okay, this is where we are. These are the things that we need to do to actually be competitive in that sense. So once I started, let's say, coaching them on that, and my mindset kind of changed with that, it was really, okay, for the most part, all we need to do is get stronger, right? All we need to do is do some good conditioning work, whatever you're going to call that. And when the time comes to, let's say, compete, perform, okay, then we're going to work more on those skills, right? So a lot of the folks that I work with now, let's say, even if people are within that CrossFit space, we'll work on specific things like, okay, getting stronger, working on all the skills that they need to perform. But a lot of the people that I work with now have kind of transitioned more into, let's say, Gen Pop type clients. So for the Gen Pop clients that I do have right now, my general philosophy with them is like, hey, it's really holistic in the sense. It's, hey man, you just got to reduce your stress. You got to sleep a little bit more, and you got to eat, better food, whatever that's going to be for you. So in terms of that's kind of what I found myself doing, because I really had to go through a transition from this guy that thought he was going to be a competitor, when reality hit, it's like, you're not actually really that good at this thing. That I had to change my mindset and really figure out exactly what it is that I wanted to do, and why I wanted to do fitness. And then for me, it was more, I want to do fitness to feel good, So a lot of those things in terms of how I, my philosophy in feeling good was changing that mindset of just going hard all the time.
And what was the final straw? Obviously, realizing, okay, perhaps I'm not as good at this sport as I'd hoped. Perhaps like achieving regionals, because I had all the same goals and aspirations as well. And actually, when you talk about your story, it really sounds like it resonates with what I was going through at the time. I would be on the CrossFit Games website every day looking at Rich Froening's back squat, Rich Froening's front squat, Rich Froening's deadlift, and being like, I'm not that far off this guy. And I've just kind of come into this sport. Obviously, I just never progressed, and they all continue to progress, and I just got left behind. But, what was the point that where you decided, what, actually pursuing the sport of CrossFit and the way that it makes me feel isn't actually what I want? Because then, deciding that you're not good enough and therefore you don't want to pursue it versus deciding that you want to feel good are two very, very different things. So what was the catalyst for you?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, I think so the last competition that I did, it was a team competition in Manila. It was and one of the ending workouts, or one of the workouts that it had, was a handstand walk. So again, coming back to this downtown throwdown, handstand walks were in that workout for the first time. I was like, what the fuck are handstand walks, right? Still fairly new to the sport. Couldn't do them then, and still couldn't do them leading up to that time. So that was around, I think, 2015, 2016 time. I actually, I trained my ass off trying to figure out how to handstand walk, and ended up hurting my wrist. I had no idea what was wrong with it. Did the competition, was still trying to handstand walk. And after that, okay, I came back kind of hurt. So that time went on, and eventually, after months of still trying to train, like competitively, quote unquote, I just had to get it checked out. So I had my wrist checked out. I ended up having a ruptured ligament in the wrist that I needed surgery for. So I got surgery for it. And I was just, for me at that time, I was like, okay, well, you've trained this much, so hard to be competitive, right? I took a look at myself like, okay, do you really, really want to be competitive? Or do you just want to enjoy this style of training, right? So it was that point, once I had surgery, I just focused myself on, hey, I still love training like this, but what I wanted to transition to was really, okay, how can I use my experience to then either teach other coaches or coach people that, want the same thing, but maybe can approach it a little better than I had, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Your experiences are kind of informing the way that you work with people now.
Yeah.
You know, what was that process of letting go of like the athlete persona and being, you know, the guy who wanted to get to regionals and like, you know, perhaps that defining you as a person, to then saying, actually, you know what, like I'm ready to be a coach now and help other people? Because, you know, two very, very different personas. What was that process like for you?
I mean, I think for the most part, it wasn't too bad. I think kind of going back when I took just a deep look in terms of like, okay, you know, are you really competitive, or, you know, was that just something, a drive that because you were, let's say a CrossFit coach that you had to do, right? Did CrossFit coach mean that you had to compete? And when I took a look at it, it's like, you know, it wasn't really about that, because I was still, you know, working with folks. And to me, it was always coaching was what I love to do, right? I loved connecting with people. I love being able to help them either become better coaches or just really excel at, you know, the goals that they had, right? So for me, I want to say the transition wasn't too bad. It was more of thinking about, okay, number one, I couldn't, like, let's say, do some of the stuff competitively anymore with the wrist surgery. So that was one thing. And at the same time, it was more like in my head, like, you know, after taking a little bit off, I kind of told myself that, you know what, I don't think you really like to get into that pain cave and do what you have to do to be competitive, right? So once I started kind of dialing it back on that, I was like, you know, I like the way this feels better. And that was just me, you know, personally. So it wasn't too bad. It was just more of a matter of like figuring out, okay, from a competitive side, you can still be competitive when you want to be, let's say in the open, but I didn't hold numbers as high anymore as, you know, as I wanted them to be. So like, let's say PRs or all that kind of stuff, just, it didn't really matter to me. All I wanted to do was kind of just work out, have fun, and, you know, coach other people.
Okay. So, you know, for someone who's let go of like, ambitions to be competitive in the sport, but you're still training, I guess, like relatively hard. You're still training within CrossFit methodology, whatever that means. You know, how does one continue to progress forward with their training when they lose that competitive goal, or the competitive goal is no longer the thing that's driving them anymore?
I think for them, it's, you know, it's cliche, but like kind of taking a look at, okay, what's the why of what you're doing, right? So for me, when I look at, let's say, being competitive, I always look at competitive as, you know, how am I being competitive with myself, right? Whether that's going to be from, okay, I'm being competitive in terms of how consistent I can be from week to week, or, you know, looking at it in terms of like, if it's not a PR goal, I take a look at like, what are the small wins I can get from session to session. So my mindset has, you know, changed in terms of, okay, whatever I'm training, I want to come back the next week and just feel a little bit better. I want to feel a little bit stronger. So if that means, hey, if it's a strength piece and I got, you know, 10 reps on one exercise, maybe I can do 10 reps at like, okay, 5 pounds heavier. That's for me. That's okay. That's winning for me. And it's the same thing with conditioning pieces. It's playing that area. Like, oh, I mean, even for conditioning, I don't want to do that brand type stuff, but, you know, simple stuff like if I'm on the bike for, you know, intervals from week to week, like how am I feeling from week to week? Am I feeling better? That's for me where I find my competitive nature. So I think for anyone that's transitioning out of that, it's a matter of finding a place to where they can feel competitive either with themselves or where they know they're comfortable knowing like kind of who they are and how they want to push themselves. And, you know, if that's either training by themselves or like in a group setting, you know, let it be that, you know?
Okay. Interesting. You know, you talked about passing on your knowledge now from the mistakes that you made as someone trying to get better in the sport. When you look back at what you were doing circa 2019, 2013, 2014, you know, what are some of the biggest changes that you now see in your coaching philosophy versus what you were doing as an athlete then?
So as an athlete back then, I was doing 2-a-days, 5 days a week. And at the time, not really knowing kind of why I was doing, I mean, not really knowing why I was doing 2 days a week. Like I said, I had a coach. It's like, okay, I'm going to be competitive. So this is what you do. You get a coach and, you work out twice a day. So back then it was working out twice a day. It was, but at the same time, like I said, not sleeping. It was doing a ton of drinking, not eating the way like an athlete should eat. Right. So my biggest, change now is like for someone that's going to be, how I coach, like, hey, listen, I tried to do this as an athlete. There's just no way that you can do that. Right. If you're going to be competitive or you want to be competitive, just know that there are certain priorities that you need. And that number one, it's really taking care of yourself. Right. Whether you're an athlete or not an athlete, I think that's the biggest thing. It's, what are the things that I can do to really take care of myself so that I can succeed in the goals that I want. Right. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I kind of,
No, I mean, for sure. I think kind of going back to why we used to train twice a day was just because that was what everyone did.
Yeah, exactly. That's what everyone did.
And it was like, well, if everyone who's good at this sport is training twice a day, then that must be, the secret recipe to getting good at the sport. And, I think it was just it's such a young sport, and it still is such a young sport. And I even think back to 2013, 14, looking forward 6 years to now, like I would have never guessed that people would be training with the intensity and the volume and for doing it as long as they have and still being quote unquote healthy. Like there's no way that we could have predicted what the human body could do. And so, I think just a lot of this is perhaps not necessarily our fault, but it was just the norm of the sport. It was like your everyday person hanging out in the CrossFit gym who wasn't even an athlete, who had their own career on the side, who had social habits like going out and blowing off some steam in a weekend, was training twice a day, 5 to 6 days a week, maybe even 7 days a week. Yeah, that was just the norm.
And that was the thing too. I mean, like even with that, I'm coming in from let's say a coach side. So for me, it's not like I had a job on the side. So let's say, for example, now whenever I had a client that wanted to get better at the sport, and it's like, hey, this is what I do for work. Plus I have a family, and it's kind of telling them, it's like, okay, this is exactly what's going on in your life, right? Do you want to dedicate this much time to excelling at the sport? Or is your real kind of goal just to, in a class setting or in an open setting, is that where you want to excel, right? And then really just letting them know, like, do you need those, 2 days of work, twice a day workouts to do that? Or can you get that from, a good focused 45 to 60 minute session? You know what I mean? Because that's where my mindset was before too. It's like, oh, I got to train 90 minutes, 2 hours plus the doubles. It's like, I look at it now, it's like, man, I really cherish the time that I have right now where I'm just in and out of the gym for 30 to 45 minutes. And like, okay, now I can focus on whatever I have to do for the rest of the day.
Yeah. I think, all of us who've been through that and didn't live to tell the tale. So like myself, yourself included, perhaps Ant, is not one of those people because he's still living that and still thriving. But, we all have like our own breaking story. Like we all have the point. For you, it was the wrist. Yeah. And realizing that was a catalyst for me. Like I had my own host of injuries, very much the same. And it was like, is this just worth it anymore? But and I think back as well, and I think back to a lot of the clients. I think with Coastal Fitness, we in the early days, I guess around about the time we're talking 2014, 2017, probably, and we kind of developed a reputation of being like the competitive gym in Asia. We could churn out people to be regional athletes, and it wasn't really the case. It was the fact that we had a talented coaching team who were also athletes, and people portrayed that image kind of onto our whole organization. But at the same time, like I will admit, I had a real interest in working with athletes. I still do. I still love people who have like very lofty goals, who want to be an athlete, and the whole planning process really excites me. But certainly back in, looking back 3, 4, 5 years ago, it used to be a really common inquiry or question that we would get as an organization, which is, hey, I want to go to the CrossFit Games. What do I need to do? Or, hey, like, I want to go to regionals. I'm ready to do whatever you want. But really, in the last 2 years, we don't really get those questions anymore. But every time I kind of go to places like China, who are still kind of in that infancy stage, I guess, of CrossFit, You know, do you still get those questions a lot? Of people coming to you and asking you like, hey, I want to be, you know, at this level. And you know, when you look at it, it's like, wow, you know, I don't think you really understand, you know, just how much work has to go into achieve that. Is that a question you get asked a lot still?
You know, personally for me, I don't get that question a lot, at least with some of the clients that I'm working with right now. And to be honest, I think just for me as a coach, you know, I think I'm at that stage where that's something that I would just be like, hey, you know, if you really want to do this, I would actually refer them, you know, to someone like you or to another person. And that's basically for me, just like I said, when we're coming back to philosophy, you know, I love getting people better at aspects of CrossFit. But I also know that as far as for me as a coach, those aren't necessarily the individuals that I would work with. Right. So the people that I would work with are, like I said, people that do enjoy being in the group classes, want to get better. They can get better, but they have, like, let's say, we'll call it quote unquote normal lives. Right. So those are the guys that's like, where I can get them better, you know, and at the same time, just help influence them to live better, you know, holistically, right? Outside of the gym and inside of the gym. I think even in China now, it's interesting because I see at the gym that I train at, there's a group of guys there that, you know, they train super hard. You know, and this is for me, assuming from the outside, not really knowing, but, you know, I feel like, okay, if I was going to coach them, right, in terms of what they're doing, I would always come back to, you know, how you're sleeping, how's your recovery, you know, how are you eating, versus just going hard, you know, all the time right now, you know?
And I think it's really important for the general consumer who's listening to this, who probably has that example of person in their gym. That looks very deceiving. You know, you have to really look under the hood to know what's actually going on with an individual, because some of these people look like extremely fit muscle. They're extremely fit people, sorry. They're very well muscled. They're lean. They look healthy. They're strong. I mean, they're turning up and pushing hard every day. But I mean, we were once those people.
Yeah.
But we just, it didn't last very long, you know? And so I think it's really important to put into perspective, like, you know, that the other stuff you're talking about, you know, nutrition, sleep, recovery, stress, lifestyle, you know, like those are the things that are going to really dictate just how long you can be successful, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and like I said, going back to how I teach it, just from the experience for me, like if I had known, you know, it's funny because it all sounds like simple stuff, but if I had even known how to navigate any of that back, you know, 2013, 14, 15, like I would probably be better now, you know, but better late than never to learn that kind of stuff, right?
No, for sure. I'm exactly the same. Okay, let's talk about training then. So, you know, a lot of your clientele, you know, they're probably thinking more about longevity than competition. They're thinking about, you know, health and thriving in life. I know that you're a fan of aspects of CrossFit methodology. I see it in your training yourself. I see you talking about it and posting about it. You know, how do you take the things that you love about CrossFit, whatever those things are, and integrate them into the training program for someone who's actually not interested in the sport at all? Their goals are to thrive with their grandchildren, to live long lives, to be pain-free, to be happy. You know, what's your process of sieving through that and integrating it into their program? Or do you even do that at all?
I think it really depends. What's interesting is, like, a lot of the people that I started working with in the beginning, they were, you know, coming from that CrossFit background. So for them, how I integrated, let's say, the way that I would train, it's really kind of taking a step back, where this idea of it's really sustainability, right? So kind of going back to, if someone for me wanted to excel, like let's say in the open or these other, you know, kind of throwdowns, it was more taking a look at, okay, let's see exactly, you know, where you're at, right? Once we saw where they were at, it's more of a matter of, okay, they still want to express these activities, these type of training. So it was more taking a step back, seeing exactly what they could do and trying to get them better in those aspects without shit kicking them, right? That was the biggest thing, because like a lot of people that I had that were within that CrossFit space, they wanted to get better, let's say, get better at pull-ups, get better at muscle ups, etc. I wanted to take it back. Okay, let's slow it down and let's see you do ring dips and strict pull-ups, something like that, right? So it was a matter of just breaking it down for those guys. Now, what I love now about, let's say, when I'm working with people that aren't even into CrossFit, where their thing is just, let's say, lose weight, gain muscle. I love now that having these aspects of CrossFit in terms of, let's play from an aerobic or conditioning sense, I can implement that into their training programs without making it seem like 3 rounds per time or, AMRAP or, EMOM. It's kind of, I would structure it like, okay, we're going to do, a squat, you're going to rest a certain amount of time, and then we'll just kind of make it seem like we're doing, AMRAP, 10 thrusters, 10 deadlift, 10 box jump, whatever, but it's structured in a way to now, okay, they can have that same structure of conditioning and that same style of CrossFit movements, but it's really tailored for them to where they're not moving super quick. And, I'll take it back to, looking at other boot camp style programs, right? Let's say, not to put down F45, but I'll use F45 as an example, right? Where it's, that 45 seconds of work, but it's just kind of moving. I think they can still do that, but more intelligently, like slow them down, put them in a space to where they can get better at the movements that that we're training, versus just like that old, like I said, CrossFit mindset of just like going ham at that one point,
And, do you find that a lot of the people who are coming to you, are they coming to you because, like us, they're fed up, they're done with CrossFit, and they're done with being broken, done being injured? Or, sometimes you'll have the client who wants to still excel at CrossFit and whatever that means, and then here they come to you for help, and you're like, here's how we're going to do it, we're going to stop doing it. And, our training is going to look a lot less like what you think CrossFit is, and it's going to look more like perhaps bodybuilding or structural work or, low intensity aerobic training. How does that go down for you?
I'd say it's both. So I think from some of the clients that come in from the CrossFit realm and they think, okay, this is what we want to do. And then I slow it down and they don't see a bit of, I guess, what they would think as CrossFit. They're kind of like, okay, am I going to get a different workout the next week, or is it going to be the same thing? So I think for me, it was more when I got a client like that and just really understanding, okay, they're coming from this background. It was me just being open and honest. Like, hey, we're going to slow it down. We're going to break it down to, let's say, bodybuilding or structural type stuff, but don't worry, you're still going to get the fun stuff that you like. And I think for me with those type of clients, it was a matter of setting up the expectation for that. Right. Whereas let's say other people that aren't coming from, not even a CrossFit sense, or they're just coming into because they feel beat down, they feel broken just from the stresses of life and work. What they would need is really, okay, they just needed to get stronger. So for me, it was easy to, like, again, going back to that idea of my initial introduction to fitness, like bodybuilding or whatever, that's where kind of I found my bread and butter working with those type of clients. So for me right now, whatever you want to, functional bodybuilding is like the hype word. I feel like such as like a marketing thing, but all it is to me, it's resistance training, and it's moving, and it's breathing, moderate to hard every now and then, however you're going to structure that. And what I like I said, what you had mentioned before, like coming from that CrossFit background, I think what I like being able to do is, okay, I can take aspects of that idea of CrossFit, right? And I can still implement it in this way of just solid resistance training and good breathing.
Yeah. It's funny. I think it's all of these kind of conversations about, like pulling people away from the stigma of like doing a CrossFit workout versus not doing a CrossFit workout. It's funny because the definition of CrossFit is just so open. It's really down to the interpretation of the coach who's prescribing it, or the gym that you're a part of. And that is really what dictates and influences what our perception of CrossFit is. But at the end of the day, if CrossFit as a sport is about getting better at the sport, then, bodybuilding is actually what we all need.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like when I was lucky enough, because like I said, I started off in bodybuilding. And so when I actually came into doing the sport, like, oh, deadlifts and, squats and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I could do that. Whereas, again, coming back to someone that's never done CrossFit, that's normally where, where we'll start off. If I'm looking at all the movements that, okay, like level 1, 9 foundational movements, that's all bodybuilding to me. But, again, however you're going to, play the word in the end, it's all we're really doing is just we're training, right? Obviously, if someone wants to be excel at CrossFit, they're going to have to do the stuff that, or the training that's specific to that sport. But I think anyone can just have fun, or really get better training in that methodology, or whatever methodology we're gonna call it. And as long as they're consistent and working hard at that, and staying healthy, they're gonna get better and excel.
Okay, so I think you've alluded to this already. When for most folks who are coming to you from the CrossFit space, maybe that's a CrossFit gym, or they've had another coach, or they've been following an online training blog, which has been telling them what to do every day. What are some of the biggest, maybe mistakes might be the right word for it. What are some of the biggest downfalls or mistakes repeatedly that you see folks in the CrossFit space making, and why it's perhaps hampering their progress?
I think for me, at least within what I've seen, I think the biggest one would be just program hopping. A lot of times, and like what I've seen, at least, back in, early days of CrossFit, or even here in China, there's always like that, shiny object syndrome, where it's like, oh, I'm going to do, comp training combined with like Invictus, combined with, this other stuff. So no one's really ever giving time to any one program to work, right? And whether it's an individual model, or whether it's a template program or whatnot, the biggest thing that I've seen is like people just don't give time for anything to work, right? They want to be able to, I guess, like the whole thing. I mean, with CrossFit, you got to get better at everything, right? So then now they're just jamming everything all together, versus like, okay, let me just stick with one thing for a little bit and then kind of move on. So I'd say for anyone that, coming into it, like, just stick with something for a little bit, give it time to actually get better.
But you know what? You can understand why they feel that way, and especially if they've done the level 1, constantly varied exercise. I mean, that alone in the definition tells you that repetition of doing the same thing again is not what we should be doing, doesn't it? Right? And so I can always understand, because I mean, I came from a strength conditioning background, right, where everything was periodized, progressive overload for 4 to 8 to 12 weeks sometimes. And, my biggest kind of head scratcher when I did my level 1 was that was kind of now out the window. And so I started to second guess, and I had some really, really great mentors before doing that level 1. Charles Poliquin, one of the greatest ever strength coaches, was like one of my first like real introductions to strength conditioning. And I flew to like the UK to learn from his team there. And suddenly I come to this level 1, this 2-day seminar, where suddenly I was like, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe those Poliquin guys actually don't know what they're talking about. And maybe like structured progression and progressive overload actually isn't the way to get really good, because this Rich Froning dude is pretty damn good at squatting, bench pressing, and doing all the other movements, and he's not doing linear progressions. And so, yourself and I know, and I think a lot of people who've kind of been through a similar journey to us know, is that, too much variance in a program is sometimes the biggest killer for progression long term.
Right. And even with that, I think the biggest thing is like, once, let's say, if you build a base, let's say from those foundations of like, let's say, following a structure, for me, I've always found, at least for myself, now that I've done that, once, like, if I have something that came up, I can do that, right? Versus just like, if I was, trying to get better at one thing, but I never got that enough, right? Then I wouldn't be able to handle various workouts that came my way. Then that's, I mean, personally for me, right? But I definitely see like why people, and that's the biggest thing too. I think for, let's say, for anyone, like I've had clients to where, I've tried to, okay, this is the structure that I want to do, but you just know that they resonate, with like chaos sometimes. So I think the biggest thing that I have to learn as a coach too is like, if that's kind of who that person is, I got to let them do that and just accept it, right? I can't control everything all at once. So that was one of the biggest things that I learned, is in terms of like, CrossFit, you are going to have that variance and people resonate with that already. So it's like, hey, I'm going to let you choose to do what you want at certain points. And that, because that way they're going to, they'll have more fun that way also.
I think as a coach, you actually learn a lot about your clients when you give them freedom to do the things they want, because people do the things people typically do, the things they enjoy. And I think it always gives us a really unique insight into they actually really enjoy doing thrusters and pull-ups. I mean, I don't at all, but that's interesting because maybe we have to try and find a way to integrate that into a training program to ensure that they're enjoying the process as well as making progressions the way we want them to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to, what you said, it's, even though they're, let's say, coming to you as the coach, right? At some point you still have to really think about, okay, they still have to buy into the program, buy into the coaching process, right? So if I'm, continually harping on like, you can't do this, you can't do that, or you got to do it my way. Some people might, resonate with that. Some people like, no, fuck this. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be able to like enjoy the training itself. And, I've learned that the hard way a couple of times too. Like, it's like, if I'm like, no, you got to do it this way. And, I got to control every little aspect of, the training, then at some point it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to want to work with that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think athletes and our clients are just such valuable resources for learning as well. And I think as soon as we make a relationship one way, where it's our way on the highway, we actually prevent our ability to learn and grow as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned working with clients like that have, from all kind of walks of life, is I learned just as much from them as they learn from me. And that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from it.
Yeah. What is the future of CrossFit looking like in China now?
Whew. God, so I, of course, with the whole like kind of CrossFit thing that came up a few months back, I think it's interesting because in China, personally for me, I don't know how much they really took onto it. I mean, to let's say the this quote unquote seriousness of it compared to how it was back like in the States, right? I think CrossFit, at least in China, I still believe that for CrossFit in general, this is going to be a place for it to kind of thrive and grow. I think that once, let's say, COVID or kind of calmed itself down, that the competitive aspect of CrossFit is really going to be big here. I think it's just a matter of like, it's a country of like millions and millions and millions of people. It's a country of like that have excelled at gymnastics, weightlifting, and all that kind of stuff. So it's always a matter of time. Like, every year I see like, who's this weightlifting guy like coming into the gym? It's like just beasting it up. I was like, holy crap. It's a matter of time before that kind of blows up here. So in terms of like, let's say CrossFit as a training methodology, as a route for fitness for people, I think it's gonna keep on growing. I don't see it, having like a little stall. I can only imagine that the competitive aspect of it, it's still going to be growing as well. As far as like, let's say gyms coming up, it's going to come. There's so many places here in China where people, like I said, it's still that raw, that excitement of CrossFit. And I think that's going to be building up at least for, years to come here for sure.
Yeah. I've always said I can't wait for some athlete in China to really grab CrossFit by the horns. And I think we've seen in the last few years, like people who looked like they're on a trajectory to really become something. And then for some reason, they would just disappear, drop off. And I never really know why, but I really do think, like you said, like there's so many Matt Frasers in China right now that have the potential just to like, they just need the right coach at the right time to be, something really, truly amazing. So I've always said there's going to be a time where we're going to see, even if the whole national champion thing didn't exist anymore, a time where we're going to see Chinese athletes, hopefully they have the potential, competing with the best in the world at the CrossFit Games.
Yeah. I think part of that too, it's, because CrossFit here, it's so young, and like you do have the people that are mostly athletes that want to get into it. I think it'll come down to also, let's say, Chinese coaches growing in the sport as well. or just growing here, becoming better coaches, and that can really, be able to have mentors, like, let's say like yourself, right? Who does well in the sport as a coach, for them to actually connect with Chinese athletes, because that's what I feel like that can grow here. It's the education of the coaches here, and how to have, like, having other mentors that they can learn from, because I think that's what, for a lot of people that I've helped out, that's what's missing for them. It's like, oh, we've been lucky enough to be able to have these other coaches where we can learn from, because, like, okay, we can speak English, we understand what's going on. Whereas, like, where I was always wanted to give someone, like, oh, just read this book, or, kind of do this. It's like, it's easier said than done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Erwin, we're wrapping up towards the end of this episode. Tell us about your future. Where are we going to see you in the next few years? Where are you taking your business? Is there anything you have in the pipeline exciting you'd like to share with people?
Honestly, for me, where I want to take the business is just really working with people that want to improve themselves, right? They want to be able to evolve through fitness. They want to be able to, in the long run, just become self-sufficient, right? For me, myself, in terms of let's say a CrossFit coach, like I mentioned before, I'm kind of a floating CrossFit coach at the moment. So I enjoy what I'm doing. What I want to be able to do in the future is be able to be one of those coaches here that can at least really leave my mark on some of the coaches that are growing up in the CrossFit, whatever I can kind of teach them from my experiences, whether that's, connecting with people, whether that's from a technical standpoint. And, for the most part, it's just enjoying however many years we're going to be out here, really.
Awesome. Well, mate, you're doing an amazing job, and, I just can't wait to keep on watching your journey. Yeah, and I know you're going to achieve amazing things.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, well, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for your time, buddy. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting about you, your history, coaching, and of course, the future in China. Mate, thank you for your time, and you have a great day.
Thanks, Ed.